The handbag hit the floor before either of them spoke. It landed hard. The contents didn't spill. It just fell, and the sound cut through the tail end of the gala noise like a deliberate punctuation mark. Brandy looked down, then up. Seo Jiun stood in the corridor, watching her with the calm certainty of someone who had not bumped into her by accident. "Watch where you're going," Brandy said. Jiun straightened slowly. Her eyes moved over Brandy like she was correcting a mistake in a report. "You still talk like you belong here," she said. "That's your problem." Brandy held her gaze for 1 second. "I don't have time for this," she said, turning away. "You really think," Jiun said behind her, "wearing his ring changed anything?" Brandy stopped. The corridor had gone quiet enough that even people pretending not to listen were listening. Brandy turned back slowly. "That's rich," she said, "coming from a woman who tried to have me removed from a first-class cabin." A pause exactly long enough to land. "I'll take that as a compliment." Something shifted in Jiun's expression. Not surprise. Adjustment. Like a target she expected to stay still had learned to move. She stepped closer. Unhurried. Controlled. "That was 2 months ago," she said quietly. "A lot has changed since then." "Has it?" Brandy said. "You're still walking into rooms I'm already in. Still reaching for things that aren't yours." Her head tilted slightly. "What exactly has changed?" "You got a ring." Jiun's eyes dropped to Brandy's hand, then returned. "Interesting thing about people who appear suddenly," she said, voice low, "they usually disappear the same way." "The ring didn't change anything," Brandy said. "I was always this. I'm not something that appears and disappears. You just needed a closer look." Jiun leaned in slightly. "I've been looking very closely," she said. "Closer than you think. And what I've found," she paused, "is very interesting." The air shifted. Not loudly. Not visibly. Just enough that the space itself seemed to register someone arriving before anyone turned. Cha Dojin appeared at the end of the corridor. His eyes found Brandy first. Then Jiun. "Is she bothering you again?" he asked. "Nothing I can't handle," Brandy said. Dojin looked at Jiun. "One word. Behave." Jiun held his gaze for exactly as long as pride allowed. Then she looked away. Dojin took Brandy's hand. They walked. Jiun stayed where she was. Her handbag remained on the floor. She didn't pick it up. Not yet. Brandy didn't know yet that this was the second time Seo Jiun had tried to remove her from a room. The first time hadn't failed. It had only started something she couldn't see coming. And if this is your first time here, subscribe and stay with me because what unfolds in this story, you don't want to miss a second of it. Outside, the gala noise reduced itself to a murmur behind closed doors. The night air was cool and the city stretched out below the venue steps in the particular way of cities that don't care what happens above them. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Brandy looked at him. "I think I'm in trouble." Dojin's gaze stayed on her a second too long. Calm. Certain. The look of a man who has already assessed the situation and reached a conclusion he isn't surprised by. "You're not alone," he said. He held his hand out. She took it without hesitation. No pause this time. No deliberation. Just her hand in his, and the specific quiet of two people who have stopped pretending something isn't happening. Then Brandy reached into her clutch for her phone. Dojin looked at her. "What are you doing?" "Getting home," she said. "I didn't bring my car." He looked at her with the expression of a man encountering mild unreasonableness. "You're supposed to go home with your husband." A pause. "Unless you want to blow our cover." She stared at him. He raised an eyebrow. She stared at him a moment longer, and then she laughed. A real one, the unguarded kind, the kind that arrived before she could manage it. And he laughed too, which was the kind of thing you wouldn't expect from a man who carried that much quiet around with him everywhere, and the unexpectedness of it made her laugh harder. She put her phone away. They got into his car. One of the men held the door. The city moved past the tinted windows on the way out of the venue district, and neither of them said anything, and it was the most comfortable silence Brandy had sat in for as long as she could remember. Jiun sat across from her mother, a composed, silver-haired woman who had passed her bearing and her strategic instincts directly to her daughter, and who was currently watching Jiun with the careful attention of someone reading a situation before responding to it. Jiun was not composed. "The same woman," she said. "The one from the first-class incident. She's everywhere I go. She was at the gala tonight. She had his ring on her finger, and she stood there like she stopped. Can you imagine?" She has his ring. A ring that was supposed to be mine. Her mother's expression sharpened. What ring? She's apparently married to Dojin. Jiyoon set her glass down. The plane incident must not have been a coincidence. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Dojin. Married. And nobody knew? No announcement, no event, nothing? A secret marriage. A pause. Something is off. I think so too, Jiyoon said. But I'll find out exactly what's up. Her mother reached across and covered her hand. Don't cry. You deserve better. He was never right for you, and whatever this woman thinks she has, it won't last. Jiyoon looked at her mother. She didn't say what she was thinking. What she was thinking was, this isn't over. Not even close. Dojin's building was the kind of building that didn't have its name on the outside. Brandy stood in the entrance and looked around. Then she looked at him. Why did you bring me to your house? Dojin looked at her. When I said your husband is supposed to take you home, you didn't understand that? A pause. It's also late. Don't worry. I'll take the couch. She stared at him. He showed her to the bathroom. Handed her folded clothes, a soft set, clearly not his. She looked at them. Looked at him. You keep women's clothes? He laughed. Hard. Sudden and genuine and slightly startled, like it caught him before he could decide whether to let it out. My sister. She said I should keep some. Just in case. In case of female visitors? In case of female visitors, he confirmed. Do you have them often? He looked at her steadily. No. She took the clothes and went to shower. When she came back, he was in the living room, jacket off, looking marginally less like a man who controlled things from a distance and slightly more like a person. They ended up on opposite ends of the couch with the city visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. They talked. Really talked. He told her things about the business that weren't public, the real shape of it, how deep it went, the kind of reach that didn't appear in newspapers because it was specifically designed not to. She understood the word powerful was insufficient. She told him about the foundation. What it actually meant to her beyond the family name. The projects she ran quietly, the ones that didn't get photographed. Then she asked, why is Jiyoon so particularly bitter? Even tonight, she mentioned she's been looking closely. That she'd found something. A pause. Do you think she knows this is fake? Dojin was quiet for a moment. I don't think she knows, he said. Not yet. He looked at Brandy directly. About her bitterness, I should have told you this earlier. I decided it wasn't necessary. I was wrong. A pause. Jiyoon and I were engaged. About 18 months ago. Our families arranged it. I called it off. Brandy looked at him. She tried many times after that to fix things between us, he said. It wasn't possible. I think seeing her with me, seeing you with me, triggered whatever she never dealt with. His voice was flat and factual, not cruel, not apologetic. Just honest. She never really moved on. Then Brandy nodded slowly. They kept talking. Lighter after that. They both said things to each other that made them smile and laugh. Then somehow the space between them on the couch was different than it had been. Brandy noticed it first. She had stopped analyzing him. And it didn't feel like a decision. It felt like something she had already done without realizing when it started. That realization stayed in the space between them longer than either of them spoke. He leaned in. He kissed her. She didn't stop him. Didn't pull back. For a moment she was simply there fully, without calculation, without the filing system that usually processed everything before she felt it. Then she caught herself. She stood up quickly. Good night, she said, and moved toward the bedroom before the moment could expand into something she wasn't ready to name out loud. Dojin stayed on the couch. He looked at the city for a long time. He didn't sleep much. She was gone before he woke up. The guest room, empty. The borrowed clothes folded neatly on the chair. No note. No message. The kind of clean departure that takes deliberate effort and communicates exactly as much as it intends to. He texted her. She didn't reply. He called. It rang out. He texted again, an apology this time, careful and direct and stripped of everything except what it needed to say. He watched the read receipt appear almost immediately. Nothing came back. She had read everything. She was responding to nothing. He sat with that for a moment, Cha Dojin, who had never once in his adult life waited for anyone, and found that he was going to keep waiting anyway. Brandy stood at her window. Her window knew all her secrets by now. She had stood at it through decisions and crises and the specific 3 a.m. quality of thought that visits people who carry too much during daylight hours. She stood at it now in her robe with her phone face down on the table behind her and the city spread out below doing its permanent, indifferent thing. She was thinking about the kiss. She knew what it meant. She had known what it was building toward for longer than she would admit to anyone, including herself. She had been managing it, filing it under circumstance, under strategy, under the category of things that were happening for reasons that had nothing to do with actual feeling. Last night the filing system had given out. She was finished. Completely. Hopelessly. And she knew it the way you know things that you can't unknow, suddenly and all at once, and with the specific terror of someone who has just realized they've been standing at the edge of something for weeks and have now stepped off. Her assistant appeared in the doorway. "Miss Okeke, there's a man at the door." She tightened her robe, went to the door, opened it. Dojin. Standing in her doorway with flowers, not an arrangement, not something selected by an assistant, just flowers, held in his hand the way a person holds something they chose themselves. He was in a dark coat, and he looked like he'd come directly from wherever he'd been and hadn't stopped to calculate anything on the way. She stepped aside to let him in. They sat. He looked at her with that complete, unhurried attention. "About last night." "I know," she said. "I'm not apologizing for it," he said. She looked at him. "I'm in love with you," he said. No cushioning. No performance. No checking whether she was ready. The same directness he brought to everything that mattered, stripped of everything except the fact of it. "I want the fake marriage to be real." The room went very quiet. She looked at him for a long moment. At the stillness of him. At the way he was watching her with something fully visible that she had only seen in glimpses before, unmanaged, unguarded, completely present. "When I told you at the gala that I thought I was in trouble," she said finally. "This was the trouble." A pause. "It's been the trouble for a while." Something moved in his face. "Our families," she said. "Mine already knows about you," he said. "And I understand yours already know about me." She looked at him. "How do you know that?" "I know things," he said simply. She shook her head slowly. Then, "So, what happens now?" "Court wedding," he said. "We could go today." She stared at him. "Right now? You haven't even." He got down on one knee. She went completely still. He produced a ring. Not the placeholder she'd been wearing for the cover, something real. Something with weight and intention and the specific quality of an object that was chosen rather than assigned. "Marry me," he said. "For real this time." "Yes," she said quietly. He slid the ring onto her finger. She looked at it. The way it caught the light. The way it sat on her hand like it had always been the plan. Then she looked at him, still on one knee, looking up at her with that expression she was going to spend a long time learning all the variations of, and she felt the last of whatever she had been carefully managing simply release. June had been busy. She had resources, and she had motivation, and she had the particular focus of a woman who has been publicly embarrassed twice and has decided that the third time will belong to her. She pulled everything on Brandy Okeke. The family wealth real, deep, documented across 3 continents in acquisition records and foundation filings and diplomatic correspondence. The Kolokeke name, which appeared in the footnotes of decisions that shaped infrastructure across an entire region. The deliberate invisibility, not the absence of power but the strategic concealment of it. All of it confirmed. Which meant she couldn't attack Brandy's credibility directly. The woman was exactly who she appeared to be. More, actually. So she went deeper. She pulled the flight records. The boarding manifest. The airline system logs from that specific date. She talked to the right people and paid the right amounts that would have seemed extraordinary to most people and were entirely ordinary to June, and slowly, carefully, like a photograph developing in a dark room, the picture assembled itself. Dojin had boarded after the confrontation began. No prior connection existed between them on that day. No marriage registration had been filed in the weeks following the flight. She had 3 independent confirmations. The marriage was fake. She sat with it for a long time after the last confirmation came in. She read through the documentation twice. Then she put her phone down and sat in the specific silence of someone who has just found exactly what they were looking for. Then she smiled for the first time in weeks. She found Brandy at a business luncheon 3 days later. Caught her briefly between conversations, in that small pocket of space that exists at these events between one person leaving and the next arriving. She didn't reveal the fake marriage. Not yet. That was her failsafe, the thing she kept in reserve, the weapon she wasn't going to waste on a luncheon. What she did instead was go for the relationship directly. Subtle implications about what Brandy couldn't understand about a man like Dojin. About what their history had been, what it had meant, what a woman who appeared out of nowhere after 2 months couldn't possibly know about who he actually was. Brandy listened. All the way through. Then she said, "You are engaged to him." He called it off. "And you've spent 18 months trying to understand why." Jiyoon went rigid. "I'm not your answer," Brandy said quietly. Not cruelly. Something almost gentle in it, which was so much worse than cruelty. "I'm just what came after." Jiyoon said nothing. "He didn't leave you for me," Brandy said. "He left you because he already knew. And now, so do you." Jiyoon left. She made it to her car before the composure cracked. Not because of what Brandy had said. Because it was true. Every word of it. And she had known it for 18 months and had been refusing to let it be true, and hearing it said out loud by this woman in this calm, almost kind voice was like having a door close that she had been holding open with everything she had. She sat in her car and cried in the specific way of someone who is also furious at themselves for crying. Then she straightened, wiped her face, picked up her phone. She still had the weapon, and she knew exactly where to use it. Dojin brought Brandy home. Not to the penthouse. Not to the minimal private location. To his family home, a property that didn't appear in any public record, that the kind of people who knew about it knew about because they were the kind of people who knew about things like that. His parents were already there. His 2 siblings, a younger brother who had his eyes and a sister who had his stillness and none of his quiet. Because she deployed hers only when she chose to and spent the rest of the time filling rooms with the kind of energy that made other people more comfortable than they'd expected to be. They came toward Brandy before she was fully through the door. Not performing welcome. Actually welcoming. There was a difference, and it was immediately clear. His mother was the warmest. A small woman with a specific quality of authority that doesn't need height or volume, the kind that comes from having made decisions that mattered for long enough that the authority has simply become part of her. She took Brandy's hands in both of hers and looked at her with the direct, assessing warmth of someone who had already decided and was simply confirming. They had dinner. Real food, real conversation, real laughter around a table that had clearly held many meals like this, not performances of family, but the actual thing. His father asked Brandy about the foundation with the genuine interest of someone who had read about it and wanted to understand it better, not to assess it, but because he actually wanted to know. His younger brother asked her something that made her laugh. His sister told a story about Dojin at 17 that made the whole table laugh and made Dojin look at the ceiling with the expression of a man exercising significant restraint. Brandy, who had spent her entire adult life calibrating how much of herself she showed in rooms, found herself showing more than she planned without noticing when it started. When she left, his mother pulled her into a hug. Not a social hug. "Welcome to the Cha family," she said quietly against Brandy's shoulder. Then she pulled back and looked at her. "Mrs. Cha." Brandy smiled. And something that had been careful for a very long time went quiet. The court wedding was small. His parents. His brother and sister. Her parents, her mother, who held Brandy's hand through most of the proceedings and whose composure cracked exactly once, briefly, when the registrar asked the final question. Her father, who shook Dojin's hand with both of his own and said something quiet that only Dojin heard and that made Dojin look at him with an expression of genuine respect. Her brother, who stood in the back with his arms folded and the specific expression of an older sibling who has made his assessment and found it acceptable but is not going to say so out loud. Brandy wore something simple and beautiful. Dojin wore a dark suit. They looked at each other across the registrar's desk with the specific expression of 2 people who have arrived somewhere they didn't plan to go and find it is exactly where they were always heading. They signed. It was done. Across the city, Jiyoon was in her apartment putting finishing touches on documentation she was planning to deploy at the Cha family anniversary event in 3 days, completely unaware that the thing she had built her weapon against no longer existed in the form she believed. After the signing, both families went to a private Cha property, somewhere beautiful and away from everything public, with a view that made the city look like it was performing for them rather than the other way around. They celebrated together. both mothers at one end of the table deep in a conversation that appeared to be going exceptionally well. Both fathers at the other end discovering they had opinions in common about things that mattered to men who had spent their lives building things. The siblings arranged themselves between them, and the table was loud and warm and completely real. Brandy watched it all from her seat beside Dojin. She thought about a gray sweater and a boarding pass that wouldn't scan and a cabin full of strangers and a word dropped into a frozen room by a man she hadn't met yet. She thought of all the ways this could have started. She felt his hand find hers under the table. She didn't look at him, just turned her hand over and held his. 3 days later, the Cha parents' anniversary celebration was the kind of event that announced itself through who attended rather than how it was decorated. Every significant name in their connected world was present: business, family, the quiet, influential kind of social power that didn't seek cameras. Brandy's parents were still in the country and present. The room was warm and loud in the way of people who have known each other for decades and are genuinely glad to be in the same space. Jiyoon was there. She had ensured it. She moved through the room with the practiced ease of someone who had been part of this world for years, before the engagement, during it, and in the 18 months since. People greeted her warmly. She smiled back. She was composed and beautiful and patient in the way of someone counting down to something. She spotted Brandy across the room talking with a senior diplomat and waited. When the diplomat moved away, she walked over. She made a comment, subtle, almost casual, the kind of thing that sounds like nothing to anyone not paying attention. Something about how interesting it was, the timing of certain announcements. How things that appeared solid sometimes turned out to be constructed for a specific purpose. The person who had just joined Brandy's side looked confused. What is she talking about? Brandy looked at Jiyoon pleasantly. I'm not sure, she said. I don't think she is either. Jiyoon left that exchange with the look of someone who has decided the time for subtlety is over. Across the room, at almost the same moment, Jiyoon's mother had made her way to Dojin's mother. She said something about Brandy. Careful. Positioned as concern. The kind of comment that is designed to sound like one thing while meaning another. Dojin's mother went still. Then she turned. She was a small woman. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I'm going to say this once, she said. Quietly. Completely. Don't speak about my daughter-in-law again. Not in this room. Not anywhere. Not to anyone. Not in any form. A pause that was more effective than any threat. If you do, you will regret it in ways you have not yet imagined. Jiyoon's mother straightened. Said nothing. Looked away. Dojin's mother turned back to her other conversation as though the exchange had not occurred. Jiyoon took the microphone. She looked at Brandy across the room. Then at Dojin. And for a brief moment, she considered not speaking at all. Because she could feel it. Whatever she said next would not land the way she intended. The room quieted. She had been part of this world long enough that the gesture carried its own gravity. People turned toward her with the expectation of something appropriate. An anniversary toast. A warm tribute. She smiled at the room. Before we continue, she said, her voice carrying beautifully, I think there's something this room deserves to know. About a marriage that appeared very publicly and very suddenly. The murmuring started. Then from across the room, not loudly, not urgently, with the specific quality of a voice that has never needed to perform its authority because the authority simply exists. Jiyoon. The room went silent. Dojin was already moving. Through the crowd that adjusted around him the way crowds always did, not parting dramatically but simply making room, unconsciously, the way people do around someone whose weight in a space is undeniable. Past the tables. Past Jiyoon's mother who looked at the floor. All the way to where Jiyoon stood with the microphone. He stopped beside her. Stop embarrassing yourself, he said quietly. You've done enough. He took the microphone from her hand. Not forcefully. Just completely. The way you take something from someone who has lost the right to hold it. Jiyoon stayed where she was. Dojin turned to the room. He held out his other hand toward Brandy, who was already walking toward him, through 500 people, unhurried and composed and utterly certain. She took his hand. They stood together at the front of the room. Our marriage is real, Dojin said. No preamble. No explanation. Just the fact of it, delivered with the flatness of someone who does not require the room's permission for their own life. It has been real. We chose to keep it private because that is who we are. He looked at the room. But since the question has been raised, Brandy raised her left hand. The diamond ring caught every light in the room simultaneously. Not the placeholder. The real one. The chosen one. Ji-yoon saw it. Something in her face moved that she couldn't stop in time, not quite a gasp, not quite a flinch, but the involuntary response of someone who has just understood that the ground they were standing on was never there. Dojin looked at Ji-yoon now. Directly. For the first time all evening. "I want to thank you," he said. The room was very quiet. Genuinely. "If it weren't for what you did 2 months ago on that flight, I would never have met my wife." He turned to Brandy. And in front of everyone, his parents, her parents, every significant name in their connected world, he leaned in and kissed her. The room erupted. Then phones. The specific sound and energy of a room full of people all looking at their screens at the same moment. Murmuring that was different from before. Someone showed their screen to the person beside them. Then that person showed theirs to someone else. A video was circulating. Dojin had released it himself, obtained directly from the airline, because Cha Dojin was the kind of man who could call an airline and obtain cabin footage and have it documented and held in reserve for exactly the right moment. Because he had known Ji-yoon for years and known this moment was coming and prepared for it the way he prepared for everything that threatened what was his. The footage was clear and complete. The first-class cabin. The confrontation. Ji-yoon's finger pointing at a woman sitting quietly in her seat. The attendant with the scanner. All of it, in full, released simultaneously to every major platform. The room turned toward Ji-yoon. She looked at her own phone. She saw herself on the screen. Her own face. Her own words. Her own hand pointing. In high definition, from an angle that captured everything, on a video that was now being watched by people across the city, across the country, across every platform that moved information from one screen to another. Her mother looked at the floor. Ji-yoon stood in the center of the room, a room full of people who now knew exactly who she was, exactly what she had done, exactly how this story had started and what she had tried to do with it, and for the first time in as long as she could remember. She had nowhere to go and nothing left to say. They walked outside together. The night air again. The cool and the quiet and the city below doing its permanent thing. He kissed her, properly this time, without strategy behind it, without an audience that required performance. Just the two of them at the end of something that had started in the worst possible way and arrived somewhere neither of them had planned. She pulled back slightly. Looked at him. "You had that video the whole time." "Yes. You were just waiting." "I know Ji-yoon," he said simply. "I've known her for years. I knew she would find a moment and try to use it. I wanted to be prepared." A pause. "I made a call to the airline 2 months ago. The morning after the flight." She stared at him. "The morning after?" "Yes. Before you even knew if any of this was going to." "I knew," he said. She looked at him. "I knew on the plane," he said. "Before your name. Before the gala. Before any of it. I looked at you standing in that aisle, holding your bag, not begging, not arguing, just standing there in a room that had turned against you, looking like the room was the problem and not you." He stopped. The first time in this entire story, she had seen him search for words. "I thought, not her. Whatever this room is doing, not her." She felt it land somewhere deep. "And then you turned around," he said. "When you could have kept walking. And you said exactly what needed to be said." A pause. "I called the airline the next morning because I already knew I was going to need to protect whatever this was going to become." Brandy looked at him for a long moment. "You're terrifying," she said. "You married me anyway," he said. "I did," she said. He almost smiled. The real kind. The kind she had decided was one of the most significant things she had ever seen on any face anywhere. "Honeymoon tomorrow," he said. "Honeymoon tomorrow," she agreed. She took his hand. They walked. Behind them, inside, Ji-yoon stood in the wreckage of everything she had built, not destroyed by an attack, not undone by a plan, but by the simple, complete, irreversible fact that she had been 2 months too late. And the woman she had underestimated in a first-class cabin had turned out to be exactly who she was all along. And the man Ji-yoon had spent 18 months trying to get back had already, quietly, completely, chosen someone else. If you made it this far, you already know this was never just about a first-class seat. It was about a woman who knew who she was before anyone else in that cabin did. And a man who saw it first. Subscribe and turn on notifications because you don't want to miss more interesting stories like this. And tell me in the comments, what was the moment you knew Jiyoon had already lost before she ever took that microphone?